everybody, what I've got here is an engineering prototype for the upcoming Lionel 3-rail O-scale brass hybrid CSA Challenger, and we're going to check it out right now on Eric's Trains. Alright, so just an FYI, in between the intro to this video and what you're seeing now, I came down with some sort of cold, upper respiratory infection kind of thing, and it caused me to lose my voice for about a week. And although the voice is almost back, it's not 100% yet, so it may sound a little weird during this video, but I gotta get this thing done because I can't keep this model forever. Lionel does need it back. Anyway, like I said, this is an engineering prototype of the upcoming brass hybrid Challenger. Now, the terms engineering prototype and brass hybrid, what do they mean? Well, an engineering prototype is exactly what it sounds like. This is a prototype for an upcoming model that is meant to be used internally at Lionel as they develop the model. So it's passed between the engineers here in the States and also at the factory over in Asia, and it allows them to develop the model and get everything right before they put it into final production. So what you're seeing here is something that is not meant to be sold to the public. It is solely for internal use over at Lionel. And the folks at Lionel were kind enough to lend this to me so that I could show it to you guys and hopefully generate some excitement about the upcoming model. So that being the case, because this model is not yet ready for final production, what's finished and what is not finished? Well, Lionel has told me that externally the model is pretty much complete. They might make one or two minor changes before it goes into production, but by and large, this is how it's going to look. The sound effects for this model, on the other hand, are not complete. When we start this thing up in a couple minutes, it does have sound effects loaded onto it, but those are not the final production ready sound effects. Lionel is still working on those, and specifically they told me that the road name and road number specific dialogue sequences have not yet been completed, and so you won't hear them on this pre-production model, but all that stuff will be sorted out by the time it gets to production. So when we start this thing up in a couple minutes and you hear the sound effects, just keep in mind they are a work in progress. The other thing to keep in mind is that because this is a pre-production prototype that gets passed around between people at Lionel, it's not in exactly mint condition, so you might see fingerprints or smudges, you might see scratches in the paint, chips in the paint, you might see a loose part or two, and well, here's a big one, you might see a big piece of masking tape on the tender letting you know that this is engineering prototype number 2, and obviously none of that stuff will be on the finished model, so don't worry about it. So this model is also a brass hybrid, which means the construction is a combination of die-cast metal and brass, as opposed to most of Lionel's high-end steam locomotives, which are entirely die-cast metal. Now, some manufacturers, like Third Rail, they use brass for the entire locomotive because you can get a lot of fine detailing out of brass, but Lionel traditionally uses die-cast metal. But what I've been told by Lionel is that the brass hybrid program allows them to do some smaller runs of variations of models they've already done. And this is a perfect example. So everybody knows Lionel's already done a Challenger, but they've never done one of the early CSA Challengers, and so the brass hybrid program allows them to do that. And it doesn't just apply to entire locomotives like this one. If you look into some of the recent catalogs, you may have noticed that they might offer a steam locomotive in a variety of road names, and one of those road names might have a different looking tender. Well, they used brass to make that alternative tender just for that road name. So that's what the brass hybrid program is all about, variations. When you think brass hybrid, think variations. It allows Lionel to give us some really cool variations of models that we've never had in O-scale before, which I think is really cool. All right, so now that all that disclaimer and explanation stuff is out of the way, we can start talking about this model. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into the history of the Challenger and the CSA Challenger. I'll do that when the final production model comes out. But the CSA Challenger was a light Challenger that came out before the heavy Challenger, and because it was lighter, it was also shorter, and that's reflected in this model. To illustrate that, here's my Vision Line Challenger up against the CSA Challenger, and you can see there's quite a difference. There's a reason this is called the heavy Challenger and this the light Challenger. The locomotive on the CSA is about 1.5 inches shorter than the heavy Challenger, and the tender on the CSA is about 3 inches shorter, and that explains why when the catalog first came out, a lot of people said, geez, that tender on the CSA Challenger looks really short. Well, that's because it is. Another sign of the difference between the two was that the CSA just had one smokestack, whereas the heavy Challenger had 2. Anyway, before we take this thing for a spin around the layout, we'll go in for a couple close-ups. So here you can see the pilot area looks fantastic. Lots of nice add-on detailing all over the place. And the same goes for the front of the boiler. We've got safety tread on all the walkways, an operating headlight with lighted number boards on either side. Got a little nice brass bell there, and then operational classification lights. And I believe the front of the boiler opens up, yep, like that. Nice touch. And hey, check out those nice legible builder's plates. If we look down the side, you can see we've got this really nice running gear and all sorts of piping going on. It looks great. I think they did a great job on the firebox area that goes into the cab. We've got all these rivets and cool piping details going all over the place. I really like the job that Lionel did with the spacing between the locomotive and the tender. We've all seen those Lionel steam locomotives where there's like 2 inches between the two. Not the case here. This looks fantastic, very realistic. There's actually a little drop plate between the two to allow the crew to walk back and forth, and that drop plate is very narrow, and that's just a testament to how narrow this gap is overall. They really nailed it. It looks great. And by the way, speaking of the spacing between the two, if you look down here at the drawbar, there are actually 2 holes in the drawbar coming out of the tender. And so that means you can put the bar coming out of the locomotive into one of these 2 holes, and that allows you to adjust the spacing between the locomotive and the tender. Now right now I've got it on the furthest hole, which means that these are as close as they're going to get. But if you want to let it out a bit to get around tighter curves perhaps, you can let it out to the closest hole, and that'll give you about another 1/8 of an inch between the two. I really like the job they did up here. We've got lighted number boards on either side of the smokestack, and of course there's a fan-driven smoke unit down in there. And then we've got the whistle, and right behind it is the hole for the whistle steam smoke effect. And then we've got all of this great detailing going on all over here. Lots of nice piping and so forth. And the sand dome here can be removed to reveal the controls for the engine. And we've got all the usual stuff here: run program, Bluetooth control, whistle smoke, and main smoke. And it's held down with magnets, so it just pops back on like that. Behind all that, we've got the steam dome, 4 pop-off valves, and then another sand dome. And then toward the back, we've got the dynamo, a hand-painted valve right here, and lots of nice cast-in detailing. On the cab roof, we've got these opening vents. Now, on this model, they don't stay open. They just kind of slam shut. But I've been told that on the production model, there'll be a little mechanism to keep them open for you if you want them open. And then we've got the tender, and it's probably easier if I just pick it up and show it to you. It's got a nice weight to it, despite the fact that it uses a lot of the lighter brass construction. It does have die-cast metal trucks and side frames, and so that's probably where it gets most of its weight. But yeah, there's the front. Looks great. Nice ladders and grab irons. Nice little add-on parts here. Nice rivet detailing. There's the back. We've got 2 add-on ladders and 2 functioning lights as well, which is cool. There's the top, looks great. And there's the bottom. Got a pickup roller on each truck, and there's the speaker for the sound system. Alright, now comes the fun part. Let's go ahead and start this thing up and check it out. Now, I'm going to use the extended startup sequence, but keep in mind that, as I said earlier, the crew talk sequences have not been finalized yet, so they may or may not sound like this.
Train 1 brakeman, let's get an application for continuity test. Good application, okay to release. Train 1 brakeman, we have good set, good release, good continuity on timetable train number 1. Over.
That's a roger. Good set, good release, good continuity on timetable train number 1. Out.
That's really cool. When I started this thing up off camera a few minutes ago, it had a slightly different startup sequence. Let me shut it down and try it again, and we'll see what we get.
Dispatcher, we are done for the day. Heading to the register room to sign out. Out.
Train 1 brakeman to train 1 conductor. East end of the train is clear. Clear to depart westbound on your signal. Over.
Yeah, it does.
Train 1 conductor, station work is complete. You're okay to proceed. Let's pull.
That's pretty cool. Now, one thing I didn't realize about this model is that even though it's not a Vision Line model, it still has stereo sounds like the Vision Line Challenger. So there's a speaker up here and one back in the tender. So let's check out the whistle. And of course, we've got 5 whistles. So here's the second. Here's number 3. 4. And number 5. And back to number 1. And likewise, we've got 5 bell tones. Kind of cool, I like that fast bell tone. And then we've got other sound effects like the cylinder steam. And the sound of water being added to the tender.
Water tank's full. Out.
And the sound of coal being added to the tender. Sorry, not coal, oil. And lastly, here's a sampling of some of the crew talk sounds, but again, like I said, they have not been finalized, and they certainly don't have the road name and road number specific dialogue.
Locomotive to the dispatcher. Station work complete. Ready to head west. Can I pull? Over. Hold your position. Out. Safeties are lifting. Ease off the coal till we get a signal.
Okay, let's move it out. right, so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this little preview of the upcoming Lionel Brass Hybrid CSA Challenger. They offered this in their 2022 Volume 2 catalog, and if you look on pages 16 through 19 of the catalog, you can see they offered it in a variety of different paint schemes. I would imagine one of the most popular will probably be the 49er paint scheme on page 19, as that proved very popular with the last Challenger that they did. I myself ordered the unpainted pilot version, and my reasoning for that was that, I already have 3 Challengers, so I decided to go with something completely different. But now that I've seen that this model is completely different from the heavy Challenger, I might change my mind on that and order one of the painted versions, maybe either 3819 here or maybe even the 49er. We'll have to see. Now, since we've already got the engineering prototype here in December of 2022, I would imagine the final production version is not far behind, so if I had to guess, we'll see it sometime in early to mid 2023. But anyway, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support this channel, I would greatly appreciate it. That can be done through Patreon at patreon.com/ericstrains. Patreon supporters get all sorts of benefits and perks, and you can read about those benefits on my Patreon page. I'd like to put a big thank you out there to all of my current Patreon supporters. Your support means the world, not only to me, but to the future of this channel. And an extra big thank you goes out to my premium tier supporters. You'll see their names at the end of this video. And lastly, if you'd like to buy an Eric's Trains t-shirt or anything else I might be selling, check out the Eric's Trains online store at ericstrains.com/store. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.